woe, about that, highest infant mortality, lowest life expectancy, highest rate of this, and eventually the highest rate of suicide among our youth. To give an example of what has happened to us over the years because of failed and sometimes malicious federal policy and stuff. So I wasn't at all denying that we are victims and that we should resent that. But we can't continue to let it eat us, eat away at our souls and our bodies and our health and at our children. That's what concerned me, that the more we teach this history to them, and they have a right to know their history, but the more we do it and sometimes even exaggerate it, the more we are dragging them into sometime even convincing themselves that they have no chance in the world. Where they do, my God, there are schools that are turning out Indian children on the reservation that are entering fine colleges now and getting degrees and, increasingly. But we can't hold them back by constantly telling them that they should be resentful, or anything like that, by just continuously harping on our history of victimhood.
Yeah, it seems to capture time, doesn't it? So
yes, it does.
So you are specifically talking about keeping a people in a disempowered state.
Yes, exactly. Or keeping ourselves in that state.
So what kind of a response did you get when you expressed yourself?
Yeah. Well, I got a lot of good response, and there was one especially, and it was a professor by the name of Bill Yellowtail, and he is of the Crow tribe, and he's a professor at Montana State University, but he wrote a beautiful piece called The Dignity of Indian Self-Sufficiency. Now, here is a full-blood man, educated one, and he writes, "Hopelessness is killing Indian people even more surely than fry bread. But neither tragedy is necessary. We must change our internal compass to find hope and success. Only we can reorient ourselves." And he goes on, "The culture of despair worries me more than anything. A destructive dissonance has risen between our revered traditional culture and our day-to-day way of life. Dependency and despondency have beaten down self-sufficiency and dignity. A generational downward spiral of despair has created what sociologists call learned hopelessness or helplessness, a sense of no personal responsibility and intergenerational trauma, a lack of willpower almost hereditarily transmitted." And I think that says it better than I ever could. And I copied from him and got to know him. He's a brilliant man. But that's what it is, that we can convince ourselves that we're hopeless. And so we have this, almost in some reservations, it's like what would you call it, a spread of disease, of the youth suicides. And so these are people without hope. These are the kids who have written off the world in a very, very young age, from 9 or 10 or, through high school, killing themselves, OD, taking poisons or drugs or whatever, and then, or hanging themselves.
Oh, dear.
So those are the things I'm concerned about, that we can't, we've got to keep in mind what has happened to us, and for the sake of never letting it happen again. I also, to compare us with the Jews on what they've been through, and yet, you find the heads, or the composers of most of the stuff on Broadway, Jewish people, and many of the great composers and the great musicians have been Jews, and so how have they done it? Although I understand that they also suffer from what is called intergenerational trauma.
Yeah, tell me more about that, because it does seem to pass from generation to generation.
Yes, it does. In fact, I really doubted that, because it has become kind of a magic, what do you call it?
Like a cliche?
Not a cliche. It's just that it covers all problems on the reservation. So a child kills himself or herself, and they say, well, it's intergenerational trauma. We can't establish businesses on the reservation. It's intergenerational trauma. We can't, do whatever it is. Everything is written off as intergenerational trauma, and that is a part of the hopelessness, because there's nothing you can do about intergenerational trauma unless you can forget history. See, history is going to always be there, and it's always going to be as bad. In some ways, or at least the Holocaust will always be bad in the memory of the Jews, and what has happened to the Indian people will always be bad in our history and in our memory. But there's some place you've got to say, well, I can do better than that. I can compete with any of these white folks, for the sake of another word at this point, just to make a point. That I can do these things. I can live a better life. I don't have to, suffer. I'm never, ever going to forget what happened to my ancestors, but I'm not going to also let it stop me here.
It's dignity, isn't it? Before one even has the ability to break the chains of victimhood, they have to be able to see the chains that exist. And a way to be able to do that is through dignity, isn't it? Recognizing one's dignity and then in the process of reclaiming it.
Yes. On dignity, a good friend of mine, his name is Sam Deloria. He's a brother. We've kind of adopted each other as brothers.
I like that.
He was chairing a meeting at the National Congress of American Indians one time during their convention, a huge meeting, and one fairly younger man stood up and said, "We need to make the government give our dignity back to us." And this really touched something off with Sam, and he said, "Look, dignity cannot be taken from you, and it can't be given to you, And he said, if you want dignity, look around you. Look around this whole room. Here is a bunch of dignity. And that's the truth. Our leaders through the ages have been, very dignified people that have gone into Washington, D.C., the chiefs of old, And they knew what they were saying. They were great orators. And wearing their buckskins and feathers, they were center of attention in the East. And they used that attention to give voice to their people and what was happening to them. So, that dignity is there, and it can be ours. But forgetting that we're no longer put upon like we were before kind of gives credit to a lot of our leaders who made sure that I can take some credit. Not an awful lot, but changing policy in Washington, D.C. to fight for new legislation that provided better health care and to better education and better self-governance, for the Indian people. And so, you just have to do that.
And Iyeska stepped up for the job.
Yeah, I guess so. It helped me understand both sides.
Well, yeah, I really love the title, Iyeska, and the voice that you speak with.
Well, I'm glad, yeah. I tried to make sense and yet not try to put down our people. You can't, they are victims. And but the thing is we can also help ourselves, and we shouldn't just wallow in victimhood and think of ourselves as helpless and hopeless when we're not. We're fighters.
And recovering your collective spirit.
Right.
It seems like that's the key word, isn't it? Recovery of.
I think so, yes. Recovering, because nobody can do it for you. You've got to do it. Nobody can help us. If you really come down to it, they can be generous with resources, but ultimately the whole decision, the whole process is ours, and that's what it comes down to, because people have tried to help us for ages. Good people.
Mm-hmm.
And supposedly even the government, when they owed us services and stuff like that, the delivery of those services was not given in good spirit. And so, but when it really comes down to it, only we can do it, and we can't do it if we're convinced that we're hopeless.
So it's letting go of the chains.
Right, exactly, yeah.
And then on the other hand, it's about reclaiming other things like your own language, the power of the language, the power of the word, of your own words, like the reclaiming of the Lakota language, or the revival of the Lakota language. Is the Lakota language being spoken?
Yeah, a lot of the younger leaders have observed that when you start taking back those things that were powerful, important things in your culture, which includes your language and some of your definitely spirituality. And I'm not saying religion here, I'm saying spirituality. And reclaiming those things, and also reclaiming your self-government. And a lot of that is happening now. Some of it as a result of legislation we got passed in the 1970s, like the Tribal Self-Determination Act and some like those things. But and the language, very important. And I went to a Catholic boarding school, and those years of boarding schools were considered horror. They were, some people paint as almost out of Dickens, Charles. Yeah. But so I went 12 years. I was put in the school when I was 4 years old.
Oh, wow.
And I went through 12 years of that, but I learned a heck of a lot, and the biggest thing I learned was survival. And you come out of there, it's like being in a Marine boot camp or something like that. You come out pretty tough. So, and knowledgeable, because they did teach us. It was a Catholic boarding school, and now it's Red Cloud Indian School, and they are putting out scholars that you wouldn't believe, just tremendous scholars. Wow. With their education system. And it was referred to, Pine Ridge, my reservation has a lot of the problems of the northern plains, including the high rate of suicides and alcoholism, domestic abuse and rape and just a crime, and drugs and gangs. But one bright light to me there is Red Cloud Indian School. And other schools on the reservations that have been taken over by the tribe and taken out of the hands of the government are also improving and doing wonderful things. So there's hope there.
I just could only imagine the devastation of how I would feel being in the environment of what you just described, and the pride that I would also feel seeing a school like Red Cloud turning things around to a point.
Uh-huh.
In the process of reclaiming an identity and heritage, or at least recognizing an identity and heritage.
Sure, and reclaiming was good.
In your opinion, are you moving forward as a people and as a culture? Are you growing into something that you were and into something new? Oh,
yes. Overall, I just seen wonderful strides, but we got to keep being patient. We can't stop that process and say, hey, wait a minute, we're not. And also, we don't have to, what would you call it, be atavistic. We don't have to say that, well, we're going to throw everything white out the window and we're going back to what we were in the late 1800s, let's say. Mm-hmm. Including governance and culture and everything else like that. That's impossible too. Mm-hmm. But but we've got to say we can do it on our own terms.